Michael, what happened to me? It hurts.
We are talking The Haunting of Michael Barrow, also known as The Bleeding Dark. And this is written and directed by Jason Hawkins. Now, this is a very low budget kind of haunted house possession movie. What is the story? So it focuses on a family suffering a home invasion initially, and the mother is killed, leaving behind a teenage son and the husband, played by Courtney Gaines. And now after her death, the remaining family is suffering quite a bit. The husband is suffering from agoraphobia. He can't kind of leave the house, whilst the teenage son is just very, very depressed and can't get over his mother's death, kind of watching videos of her over and over again. And the actual spirit of the mother is still lingering in this property. Initially unbeknownst to these remaining family members, but she eventually kind of makes contact with the son, who is delighted initially to have kind of contact with her, but she's kind of like erratic, and eventually she ends up kind of possessing her son, but then she becomes even more problematic. We also have these home invaders coming back wanting to silence any witnesses, and we also have extended family members who are kind of coming in to check on the family and stuff. And how will it all turn out? You will have to watch the film and find out. So I'm not going to bury the lead with this one. This is not a very good film in my opinion. But why I say that up front is I think this movie is one of these films which is going to be easily dismissed as not good, rubbish, trash, however you want to say it. But I do think, even though I don't think the film overall is particularly strong, there are in fact some elements of this movie that I did quite like. So, yes, overall I think this movie is on the weaker side. It's obviously very, very low budget. And we'll come on to why I have some issues with it in just a minute. But yeah, funnily enough, there's, in a kind of like a movie which is genuinely not very good, there are some elements here that are even pretty strong. So let me go into that. So, what works? Now, the actual ghost itself, I have to say, for the most part, I think is pretty strong. Why? In a number of ways, in actual fact. Number one, I think the makeup, the practical kind of makeup, she was shot. This is how she was killed. So she's had this kind of like facial wound. And I've got to say, the practical VFX, pretty strong. You know, it looks quite gruesome. The other thing I liked in regards to the effects is the kind of like, almost like VHS sort of style flickery effect that they've done with the kind of the image of this sort of ghostly mother. So it's kind of flittering around and kind of, it looks like I say, like some old VHS kind of transfer or something, just on the actual figure of the actual ghost, which gives it this kind of, you know, it's not quite fully formed and that sort of thing. So those two things combined, I think the actual aesthetics of the ghost is quite strong. But the thing I really liked about this ghost was the way it's depicted as a sort of character. Now, sometimes ghosts are referred to as restless spirits, and this ghost is not like a fully functioning recreation of the mum. She isn't kind of like, has all her faculties, she's not completely sort of, you know, cognizant about what is going on. She's very, very angry and she kind of lashes out. And she also really seems to only be able to retain like certain fragments of her previous personality, and kind of latches on to sort of negative emotions and things like this. So for such a kind of like a schlocky low-budget B-movie, I thought the depiction of this kind of like angry spirit who's obviously been murdered, I thought, do you know what? This idea of this ghost is very strong, I have to say. For example, when she initially communicates with the son, I mean, she's just aggressive towards him. She's just kind of like, you know, she's kind of almost attacked him a couple of times, but she's trying to sort of communicate. But she only has like limited availability of what she is able to communicate with, what she can remember, and things like this. And she doesn't know what's happened to her. So that was all pretty good. And then she ends up possessing the son, which doesn't go any better, to be honest. But now she's got a tangible physical body. And, you know, she takes umbrage with her sister, who is trying to come and kind of like comfort, you know, the teenage son and the husband and stuff. But, you know, she just goes, oh, she has a bit of a rivalry with her sister when she was alive. And that's all she really can remember and stuff. And as such, she's sort of hostile. So I'm going to say, I thought, do you know what? I think the depiction of this kind of ghost, where it is just like a fragment of the previous living person, and all that's kind of left is this kind of angry spirit which is lashing out. Surprisingly good. Surprisingly good. Can I say anything else about this movie on a positive note? So the movie is relatively slow. It's not exactly a scary movie in any way particularly, and there are long periods where not a lot happens. However, we get to the finale and boy does it turn up the brutality. I won't say obviously what happens because I don't want to spoil it for you, but suffice to say it involves multiple other people, and it's pretty violent. Brutally violent, I would say, and some of the violence is achieved practically, and although I don't think the VFX are realistic exactly, nonetheless the camera does not shy away. And for example, there's a scene where someone is bashed in the head with a hammer multiple times and it ends up kind of like, you know, coming to pieces. Like I said, it's not exactly like a realistic scene, but it's so brutal in its nature, you can't help but thinking, this was pretty strong, to be honest. So that kind of level of brutality sort of, you know, it sort of comes out of nowhere in a way, because the movie's been, quite frankly, quite weak up until that point. But when it hits, it's like, wow, it really sort of hits. And I still quite liked the you know, for a low budget movie, I've got to say, I think the practical VFX, the gore effects, the kind of the stuff like that, the wounds, were good. I mean, yeah, you know, I would say, yes, it's not going to be realistic exactly, but they were good enough for certainly a low budget movie, and better than this movie would lead you to believe. So that was all pretty good. And I have to say as well, the ending of this movie, it's pretty, you know, it's not like a typical movie where it sort of ends and again, I'm not going to spoil it for you, but the ending of this movie was quite harsh. Let me just say that. So those aspects I think are quite strong. So effectively, when it's to do with the actual kind of ghost, from being a ghost to a kind of you know, possessing the son, the idea of it and some of the kind of the aesthetic choices, pretty strong, to be honest with you, pretty strong. However, now let's turn to what doesn't work, because I think this movie will be viewed by most as quite poor. So let's just go through some technical elements here. The editing is some of the poorest I've seen. Let's take the opening scene, which is basically we see via security camera, and this is the home invasion. So we see these three masked home invaders come into the house via security camera when our family is not at home. Why are they in there? We don't really know. We presume it's a robbery, but they don't seem to have taken anything. So then our family arrives at some point. We see a cut, and then the family arrives, and these home invaders confront them. And there's a little bit of a scuffle, but one of them shoots the mother, who is really just standing there. Why? It doesn't really make any sense. They just execute her, but they don't. I mean, if you're going to do that, if you're you know, thinking that it's a criminal. You've just executed someone. Why would you then leave witnesses? You know, or why even shoot her in the first place? At this point, it was just a robbery. Now you've committed murder. I mean, I guess things happen, but it's the way it was kind of depicted. It was, I mean, was it meant to be an assassination? It's just not enough information is given here. And there's 3 robbers, and then one of them seemingly is killed, but it's like, it's not, the way it's edited, you don't really see it. It's just kind of like edited out. And they think, well, there's, because we see the robbers later on, there's 2 of them. And think, well, was there a third one? Did they get shot? The editing choices are so choppy, you feel like you're missing a bit. Like even when the mother is shot, you see the gun like being pointed to the head, but then it just cuts away, and it's just like such poor editing, to be honest. Now, this movie, I believe, went into production in 2020, and it's only now coming out in 2025. So I suspect this movie is one of the cases where it's been sort of tinkered with and kind of cut and re-edited. And it feels to me like this movie's been edited to an inch of its life, to be honest, because it just has that feel to it. You know, we're giving really no context about anything, about who this family are. We're not giving any sort of characterization, what these kind of home invaders want. Why did they kill someone? Don't know. It's kind of like the police investigation. We're just told that they couldn't find them, but that's always sort of told, you know. So the general setup of this movie is just poor, just sloppy. The movie has a kind of semi-found footage vibe to it. A lot of the movie is traditionally filmed, but some sequences are through security cameras, or we see flashbacks on a kind of a video camera where the son's watching kind of old footage of the family and stuff like that. I think these hybrid found footage movies don't really work, because the whole idea of found footage is the immersion that this is genuine footage that you're kind of watching that's been recovered and things like that. Even though we know it isn't, we just like to kind of pretend. But these hybrid ones, you know, they don't have that kind of, that effect, because it shatters the illusion, because it's splitting between found footage and traditionally filmed footage, if that makes sense. That didn't work for me. The acting is poor, unfortunately. It's mainly the husband, played by Courtney Gaines, and the teenage son, neither of which I don't think are particularly convincing. I will say I don't think this movie helps the acting, because it has a tendency to really linger on kind of shots, and it almost feels a little bit uncomfortable. There's a few shots where Courtney Gaines' character, who plays the father, is just sort of like wailing around, being depressed, and it's like it lingers on so much. You're thinking, you know, it's almost a little bit uncomfortable to watch now, because you just see him sort of flailing around. He's not really doing anything, and I feel like the actor doesn't really know what he's doing, to be honest. And it ends up being a little, you know, this just feels like very cringe now, to be honest. Yeah, but the teenage son, the line delivery is kind of quite poor. So, you know, there's some sort of interactions there. You know, the son comes across as a kind of a, you know, quite an unsympathetic character, even before he's, you know, possessed. You know, ultimately he's lost his mother. Totally understandable why you would be depressed about that. But he seems aggressive towards his father, who has lost his wife, but he doesn't really seem that sympathetic towards that. So the family doesn't have a huge amount of kind of sympathy to a degree, or characterization. And then we get the aunt show up, the sister of the mother, and like she's played by Eileen Dietz, so another kind of somewhat kind of known name, if you know what I mean. And then we're led to believe that the mother had some type of beef with her, but she appears to be quite supportive, to be honest, to her remaining kind of family members, her nephew and her brother-in-law. So we don't really see any reason why that the mother had this problem. We just have to accept that that's the case. I mean, she doesn't appear to be cruel or nasty. She has a bit of an argument with Courtney Gaines' character, but I think she's clearly still making an effort. And as such, you think, well, why did the mother have this problem with her? Because she seems, if anything, to be quite caring towards her sort of family. So it really just doesn't feel like this movie has done the work in setting up this kind of relationship and things like this. And then we have our kind of like our home invaders turn up again, and it's just such a cheesy scenes. There's no reason for them to kind of like be around. I mean, it's unclear about how much time has passed between the initial kind of assault and these guys trying to kind of turn up again to finish the job. And then, well, why didn't you do that when you had the chance initially? It's just a real mess of a movie ultimately in regards to its storytelling. I said the acting isn't particularly strong. The dialogue isn't exactly sparkling here, and it's like, as I say, long sequences with just seemingly nothing happening, and it's just thinking, this is dull. And then it just has this kind of like this low budget kind of like slapped together kind of feel to it. The only decent things, as I say, are really that involves the ghost, and I have to say I preferred it when she did not possess the son, because the son is not a good actor. And even though I kind of quite liked the depiction here, again, I would have liked a little bit more context about what's happened. How is the son, you know, what's his, because he seems to kind of flip back to his own personality from time to time. It's never really clear about, you know, who's in control or what this son remembers or what he's trying to do about it, or if he agrees. Again, it's just not there. But a good depiction of a ghost in all of this, and some brutal scenes. So I'm going to give this movie a 3 out of 10 because I think overall the film is actually relatively weak, but there are some legitimately good things in it. If you want to watch that, obviously that's down to you. This is my opinion. I'd be curious to see what other people's thoughts are, but I do think this is a film that people would just kind of like, no, it's rubbish, it's low budget rubbish, without really looking at some of the things that did work in it. And kind of, that's why I try kind of like do these reviews. Anyway, it's a 3 out of 10. Have you seen it? Please let me know your thoughts, or I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.